Today's reading is from Daniel chapter 2, verse 25 to the end. In this season of remembrance, when we celebrate All Saints, All Souls, and then Remembrance Sunday itself, our lectionary readings tend to focus our attention on the great issues of life, death, and suffering. This passage from Daniel may not seem to fit that theme, but in fact, in the context, it does. The context of the story is the time of exile in Babylon. Daniel and other young men were among those forcibly removed from Jerusalem after its defeat and taken away and put into service in a foreign land. It was a time of great suffering, trauma, and humiliation for the Jewish people. The book of Daniel speaks into that situation with its vivid stories. I remember how much I used to enjoy these stories as a child, particularly the names. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are my favourite names in the Bible. The stories illustrated how powerful the God of the Jews was in a world where political defeat usually meant defeat of the gods of that land as well as the armies. The exiles appeared to be weak and helpless, in contrast to the great power of Babylon. But their God was still the one true God, and as so often in Scripture, we're given a different perspective on what is going on. The culture of Babylon valued magic, dream interpretations, soothsaying, but Daniel is found to have a much greater kind of wisdom and insight than all the Chaldean magicians. Daniel's gift of wisdom comes from God. It's not his own skill, nor is it any trick that he has learnt. With this gift, he is able not only to interpret King Nebuchadnezzar's dream, but also to relate the story of the dream itself to the king, with no rituals or spells or struggle of any kind. The contrast between Daniel and the magicians of the court couldn't be more marked. And right from the start, Daniel attributes his insight to the wisdom of God. The message of the dream is basically about the fleeting nature of political power. Nebuchadnezzar would not rule forever, nor would even Babylon be in power forever. This was an important and a motivating message for the Jewish people in exile, who could take strength from the reminder that God's power would outlast any human kingdoms who would come and go. The Jewish people were in a steep learning curve at this time of their history. They were learning that nothing is a mystery to God. Their suffering, their exile and defeat, their future, which must have seemed to them so insecure, they didn't understand any of these things, any more than we understand why the current pandemic has happened, or why something so tiny as a virus could bring the human race to its knees. They were also learning that they worshipped a God of universal power and sovereignty, not a local deity who supported his own people and battled with other gods for supremacy. The perspective that Daniel's dream interpretations gave was a broad brush one, of kingdoms rising and falling and human affairs waxing and waning, an overview of change and flux, within which the only source of peace and security was in God. This has not changed. Our world is threatened in so many ways now. Any list we make would be a long one, a long list of threats and dangers and insecurities and intractable problems. But we can take heart. What seems intractable to us is not so with the Lord. There couldn't be anything much more intractable than to be thrown, bound, into the fiery furnace. Read on in chapter 3 for that story, it's a good one. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego survived that ordeal in the company of a fourth person who walked with them in the furnace, and they were all unbound. The symbolism fairly shouts at us, doesn't it? Within the fiery furnace itself, that fourth person, that presence, was with them. They were unbound. They walked free within their severe trial. That fourth person, or third, on the road to Emmaus, walks with us as well through our trials. And the worse it gets, the more he is there, here. When we get a little further on in the year, we remember that his name is Emmanuel, God with us. There is no trial so severe where we cannot call on his name and receive his saving presence. Those of you who enjoy choral music might like to listen to Belshazzar's Feast by William Walton, which sets the story of Daniel chapter 5 to music. Experience the awe and wonder, the shivers down your spine as the invisible fingers write on the wall the judgment of God. And then rejoice in the final chorus with the exiled Jews as they exult in the power and victory of their God over human blasphemy, corruption, and evil.